Hello and welcome to week 1. This is going to be our introductory session to our language, literacy, and intellectual development in early childhood education. So the agenda for this class is we're going to start out with an activity of writing poems focused on where we are from. Then we're going to move into looking at the highlights for the syllabus, what our reading materials are going to be, and some aspects of the course. We're not going to dwell on this too long because we have a synchronous session in which we're going to go through the syllabus. Then we're going to move into definitions of language, definitions of the 5 technical aspects of language. Then I'll show you where the Maryland Common Core State Standards for English Language Arts are located on the web for your use. And then we'll briefly go over the homework or the activities that you're going to complete online this week. So activity 1 is we're going to write poems. And this poem is going to be titled Where I'm From. And I've downloaded a poem that was written by teacher and writer Georgella Lyon, and she explains, or she just narrates her poem for where she's from. And I want you to listen to that poem and then brainstorm a list of people, places, food, sports, activities, music, family sayings, experiences, animals, that have impacted your life in such a way that they have contributed to making you, you. And then play with the arrangement of these images until you find one that you like, because poems are like jigsaw puzzles that are made out of sound. And so when you find that image that you like, read it out loud. And when you read it out loud, it helps you hear where all these pieces fit together. So I'm going to invite you to write a poem and read it out loud to us and share that and share it in your own voice in the discussion board. And then listen to at least one of your classmates' poems. I would invite you to listen to all of them, but leave a message on at least one of the poems of your classmates. I've recorded my poem and I'm going to be sharing it with you as well. Okay, so moving to the syllabus, to the main books that we are going to be focusing on, the text, we are going to be reading from Reading, Writing, and Talk, Inclusive Teaching Strategies for Diverse Learners, K through 12. That book is by Mariana Sotomanin and Jessica Martel. That book has a lot of anecdotes, and it's a window into early childhood classrooms, and it's a very illustrative kind of read. Literacy Development in Early Childhood, Reflective Teaching from Birth to Age 8 by Beverly Otto is going to be our main textbook. So this is much more a textbook than the one by Sotomanin and Martel. So both of these readings, we're going to have assigned readings for each of these books for each of our weeks of class. The course itself is designed to assist you, teacher candidates, in understanding literacy acquisition and processes by observing and analyzing children's language, reading, and writing development, as well as examining current historical issues in language and literacy practice and research through, and we're going to be doing this through online experiences, observations of children, and family visits and interviews. So the focus of this course is to be able to understand the processes by which a child develops their language and literacy skills. And along those lines, we're also going to touch upon some issues that are pertinent and that impact language and literacy development. So the course has been designed to be completely online. So we will have some synchronous sessions, but sort of check-ins to touch base. But all the modules, every week module is designed to open Monday at 7 a.m. and close Saturday at 11:59 p.m. So you have from Monday to Saturday to go in and complete all the activities for that particular week. I would suggest you go in early in the week, check to see all the things that you need to do, and then early in the week complete the discussion board post so that you have you give others time to read your work, and that you have also time to read the work of others and be able to post comments on your classmates' posts on the discussion boards. The syllabus review, we're not going to do that here because we're going to have a synchronous session in which we're going to talk about the syllabus and we're going to talk about all the assignments. One assignment that is going to be due every week is an admin slip, and the admin slips are going to be due on Monday of each week. And because you have the syllabus, which has the readings for each week in advance, you can see which readings you should be completing in order to be able to submit an admin slip at the beginning of the week. The admin slip is a reflection on the readings, answering some questions about the readings, making connections between the readings and what you're observing in your internship site, or what you're observing directly with the focal child that you have chosen to work with. So moving on from this, and bring all the questions that you might have about the syllabus to our face-to-face, or not face-to-face, to our synchronous session. And hopefully I'll be able to answer all the questions that you might have regarding the syllabus and the assignments and how we're going to be completing them. So activity number 2 is a Kahoot activity online. I left the URL here for you. I'm going to post it as well under week 1, in the content section under week 1, and you can click on it and play with it if you want. It's a game, so it's not necessarily something that that is truly important, but it's made to sort of be a diversion, or something that is, going to be light and allow you to play a little bit online. And if you haven't ever played Kahoot, it will give you a chance to play Kahoot and to see how you can create your own Kahoots for your students and sort of play with that tool. Okay, so let's move into language. Mariana Soto-Manning and Jessica Martel give us a sort of a definition of understanding what language is, and sort of how, and it's the lens through which we are going to be studying language as well, right? So they say language and literacy learning are predicated upon becoming more aware of other human beings, respectful of multiple cultural perspectives, and committed to including, or at least understanding, various positionalities, points of view, and ways of making sense of the world. So when we look at this definition of language, what do you observe? You might observe that there is an inclusivity in this definition. You might observe that they're talking about multiple cultural perspectives and perhaps different linguistic repertoires that you might be encountered with when you're thinking about or you're studying language. Other definitions of language come from our other text by Beverly Otto, and she says language forms the foundation of our perceptions, our communications, and our daily interactions. It's a system of symbols by which we categorize, organize, and clarify our thinking. So it's a way of putting order to our ideas and communicating them to others, right? She says our language competencies allow us to participate effectively in a variety of social events and occupational settings and in our daily routines. So there's a functionality to language, right? So it helps us move in our social circles. It helps us carry out our daily activities. And then she also says that these competencies involve both receptive and expressive type of language. And when we're talking about receptive, we're talking about comprehension, right? So listening, reading is taking in information and comprehending it. When we're talking about expression or expressive language, we're talking about production. So when we're speaking or when we're writing, we're producing language that then is going to be communicated to others, and others are going to be receptive of this language and comprehend it, right? So that gives us a little bit of background of where these authors are coming from and what these books are going to be about. So one has a more technical conception and understanding of language, and the other has a more social, cultural, diverse understanding of language. So we're going to come to our understanding of language from both of those perspectives. So let's look at the 5 interrelated technical aspects of language. So these 5 components are going to be areas of development in terms of language. So when we're talking about oral language development for children, we're going to talk about how much knowledge they have in each of these 5 interrelated technical aspects, right? So when we're talking about phonological knowledge, we're talking about sound and everything that has to do with phonemes and sounds in language. So the sound system relationship, when we look at a letter and the sound that accompanies that letter, or when we look at a word and the sound that accompanies how we pronounce that word. We're also looking at pronunciation. We're looking at patterns of stress and intonation and how all of these play in the particular language that we are developing. In our case, we're going to be observing children that are either native English speakers or that are non-native English speakers but learning English, right? So English is probably going to be the language that we're mostly going to be focused on when we're looking at these 5 aspects of language, but they exist for any language. So if you're observing a linguistically diverse child that speaks other languages aside from English, you might also be observing their phonological knowledge in that other language other than English language that the child speaks. So moving on, from phonological knowledge to semantic knowledge. Semantic knowledge has to do with meaning. So it's going to be about the schematas or the concepts that we have attached to words. So what is the meaning of the word? Not necessarily what's the sound associated to this word when we say it, when we pronounce it, but what does the word mean? And so the semantic knowledge has to do with how much the child knows in terms of concepts that represent meaning for a particular word and the relationship across and among those concepts. Syntactic knowledge has to do with rules. So when we're talking about grammar, we're talking about syntactic knowledge. So it's how to combine the words to create a meaningful expression, how to organize the words to create a sentence that is accurately constructed. So syntactic knowledge has to do with that system of rules, and every language will have a system of rules. Morphemic knowledge has to do with the structure of a word. So knowing that each word has a different grammatical function and it is structured in different ways. So when we're looking at a word and we're looking at the root of the word or the preface or the suffix of the word, then we're talking about morphemic knowledge and what is the composition, which parts of these words could be separated, and when we put them together they create one word, or if we separate it they create another word. And that the morphemic knowledge has to do with that structure and how we play with the structure to create a word that conveys meaning. pragmatic knowledge has to do with the use of knowledge and the awareness or the knowledge of how we use language in different contexts. And how much does the child, when we're looking to assess this in a child or to see how much pragmatic knowledge they have, is how well does the child know how to use language in different contexts, and how well does a child adapt to those contexts, or how well is the child versed in knowing when to use language for certain purposes. So for example, to persuade someone or to convey a particular emotion, and how language is used in that way. So given that, we're going to do another activity in which you can put these things into practice and start playing with this. We're going to come back to those 5 technical aspects of language many times, and we're going to explore them in different ways and put them in practice until you feel like you have a good grasp on them and you can apply them to your focal child. So one of the main things that we're going to do in this course is that you're going to select a child to work with. And this can be any child from any age, birth through 8, which is the age span that we're working with. It doesn't necessarily have to be a child that speaks another language other than English, but the more diversity there is between you and the child, so the more difference there is in the background, in your linguistic background and the child's linguistic background, the more you're going to be pushed to learn new things. So if you can select a child that has a different diverse linguistic background than yours, the better it is for you, for your learning experience, right? But if you can't find a child who has a diverse linguistic background, then that's fine too. Any child will serve for the purposes of being your focal child. So we're going to do observations of the child, and we're going to use our format of note-taking, note-making, the same one that we used last semester in an observation and assessment course. We're going to complete observations of the child. We're going to do interviews with a speech therapist or speech pathologist. We're going to do interviews with our focal child, because you're going to converse and interact with your focal child. And we're going to do an interview with the family of the child to gather information. And you're also going to do some informal assessments, and concepts about print is one example of an informal assessment that you're going to do with the child to gather information and to be able to, our ultimate goal is to create a language portfolio of that particular focal child that you chose. So activity 3 is going to be to observe this child in this video, and I'm going to link the video under week 1 in content, and observe the child while she's talking on the phone with her dad and make notes related to her language development. So what can you observe? What can you observe in terms of those 5 interrelated technical aspects of language? So you can go back to this slide and look, what can you observe about her phonological knowledge? What can you observe about her semantical knowledge? What can you observe about her syntactic knowledge or morphemic or pragmatic knowledge? Just by observing this girl for a couple minutes in this video, what could you say about each of these 5 aspects of language for her at this point of her development? What could you say that she knows right now? So use the observation sheet and share your notes on the discussion board. So remember, the observation sheet has 3 columns. In one column, we describe very objectively what we saw. In the second column, we can make inferences. Oh, this might be this. And then in the third column, we can make connections with theory. And in those making connections with theory, you can refer these 5 aspects of language and say, okay, I observed this, describe it very objectively. I think that this is this in the inference column. And then that means that says something about her pragmatic knowledge, for example. And then just share those notes in the discussion board, and then read some of the ones that are shared by your classmates and post a comment on one of them or what you think that if you saw the same thing or if you saw something different, because we're all going to be watching the same video. Okay, lastly, I want to share with you the Maryland Common Core State Standards for English Language Arts. They are in this site, and I'm going to have the link, the link to this site on under week 1. And then you're going to see that there are grade bands here of ELA standards available. So you're going to see that there's standards for pre-K and K, there's standards for 1st and 2nd, and there's standards for 3rd and 5th, which are the grade bands that we're interested in. So depending on the age of the child that you're working with, either of these 3 are going to be useful for you. So keep that in mind. We're not going to have lesson plans to turn in for this course, but you might be planning lessons for your internship and planning lessons with your mentor teacher for the children that you're going to be working with. So you might want to have access to these standards. The other usefulness of the standard is going to be for you to assess where your child is. So if you compare your child, the observations and all the information that you've gathered through the informal assessments and the interviews and the observations of your child, you compare them to the standards, then you might be able to gauge if the child is where he or she should be according to the standards for the grade that they're in, or if they are more advanced, or if they're lagging behind. So that's another very good use of the standards, not just for planning, but for also assessing. Okay, so homework. For this week, then what you're going to do is you're going to participate in the discussion board, sharing your poem, your Where I'm From poem. You're going to play Kahoot if you want. It's going to be up there. And then you're going to participate in the discussion board on the child observation. So observe the video, take some notes, connect them to your understanding of language and your understanding of the 5 technical aspects of language, and share it on the discussion board. And remember, for all discussion boards, you're going to post your answer to the prompt for the discussion, and then you're going to read posts that your classmates have made and respond to at least one of them. Okay, that is all for week 1. I will see you again next week.